folks. Welcome to the Creator's Journey with the Halfling and the Spaceman. We love talking to all sorts of creators about their journeys into how they became creators. And today we have invited Herschel Sterling to join us. Herschel is a podcaster and he writes flash and microfiction, which he'll have to tell us what that is exactly. And he edits and he reads his stories or stories that maybe come to him. We'll get that all sorted out on his podcast, and he also interviews fiction writers. So, welcome, Herschel. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me. Thank you very much. It's nice.
Well, we are glad to have you. We're glad you could take the time to join us. Looking forward to a great conversation here. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. This is to start with. We ask our creators what was what was kind of growing up like for you, and the sort of things that you might have been into when you were growing up, and when did you get the creative bug?
Well, I tried to, I think I was a pretty typical American kid. I liked all the things that we like doing. I liked to play baseball and strive to have friends and played outside and dealt with, just did all of the things that little kids do. Creatively, I was into all sorts of things, anything I could get my hands on. But writing was always there. I think I
Mhm.
remember taking writing seriously the first time when I was about 8.
Oh.
I had a little book of poetry that I wrote and little journaling. I think I heard somebody talking about journaling, and I started writing a journal. Um, and it has always been something, no matter what I was doing, writing was always in the background. I thought everybody did that. I thought, well, what else are words for? If you're not going to write them down, what is the purpose of having paper and pen and all of those things? Like, why wouldn't you? So I kind of was always a writer. I think I always knew I'd end up having something to do with writing.
When you were growing up, did you watch, like Star Trek or
I certainly watched things like, the mini dramas, the small little dramas on TV, like the Rod Serling shows that he did, Twilight Zone, and um, yeah, and I my probably the biggest influence I had as a writer was Ray Bradbury. I really think I liked the short form, the short stories, the Illustrated Man, the Martian Chronicles. I was always impressed by that ability to tell a story in such a short amount of time. And the as a little kid, my fort book on a rainy day or when I just wanted to be by myself, I'd build the fort in the bedroom, and read the Chronicles of Narnia. So I think things like series meant a lot to me somehow.
I have a follow-up question to something you said. Do you remember the 1980s adaptation of the Martian Chronicles that was on TV?
I think I vaguely remember it.
So do I. I'd like to see it again sometime because I remember seeing it when I was young and being impressed. Of course, when you're a teen, it's easy to be impressed with things.
Yeah. In the 80s, I was in high school. I was probably into other things a lot more than watching television.
Mhm.
Mm,
Point.
sure.
But yeah, for sure. And I have also tended to make a point not to watch film adaptations of my favorite books. I've still
I
never seen the Narnia movies.
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever seen the movies. There's been a couple of Fahrenheit 451 movies. I don't think I've ever seen those. Never watched Dune. I just don't want to ruin that experience of the book. I did read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and also see the movie, but I saw the movie before I read the book. The book
Okay.
is far superior to the movie, as you know, most people understand that to be the case. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like to watch movies that are based on books either for kind of the same reason. But one exception, and this has nothing to do with science fiction or fantasy or anything like that, but when they did Silence of the Lambs with Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins, I read the book first, and then I saw the movie. And when I saw the movie, I thought to myself, "Wow, they really got it right." I mean, they really got details, and so I was super impressed. But that is the only time that I have ever had a situation where the movie did the book justice.
Janet, I think the only time I've seen a movie that was better than the book was Colossus,
Mm,
also known as the Forbin Project.
mhm.
The movie was better than the book, definitely.
Huh. I'm not familiar
Yeah, the
myself.
Forbin, the Colossus, the Forbin Project is a 1970s movie about a supercomputer taking over the United States. And we recently watched it again like a year ago because of all the stuff happening with AI.
Mhm.
Everybody's talking about it.
Let's continue on this thing. And you were talking about what you were like when you were young. A lot of people knew that they were going to be some kind of creator when they were growing up. So, what did you want
Yeah.
to be when you were a kid? What did you say? I'm going to be this when I grow up.
I think I always knew it was going to be writing. I had aspirations. I played baseball at a decent level. I played until I was 22, and I was in the system until I couldn't advance any further. And rather than staying in the game, like, some guys stay in the game doing other things, and
Mhm.
some guys just get out because they just want to compete, and they don't want to, everything else just doesn't seem to measure up. I was one of those guys that, just got out of it. I got into music at that point. What kept me in music again was the writing. I was the lyricist, I guess you could probably figure.
Huh. Mhm.
And that was the process of creation, of where stories come from, the nature of storytelling, and how our minds work to create stories and bring them forward. It is fascinating to me every single time, and everybody's like explanation for how that happens is different,
Mhm.
and they're all equally fascinating. I have never lost the fascination about where thoughts and where stories come from, like how they're derived, how they form in our minds, and how we bring them forward and why we bring them forward. It's always one of the coolest things about our species. We're very creative people. It's in our nature to create. It's a part of our nature to make things and to create things. And stories to me, language to me is just, I never lose fascination for it.
That sort of ties into the next question that I had, which is what inspires or drives your, specifically your creativity?
Um, this element of surprise, I think. Um, Sometimes when I write my stories, I write them a lot. I have marathons in February and August that you can find on my Substack, where I'll do in February, I'll do 28 stories in 28
Wow.
days, a new story every day, and then I upload it as an audio podcast. And I tell the story. I've done that for the past 3 years. This coming August will be my third annual Flash August Fiction. And I think I just get up in the morning. Usually in the morning, I experiment sometimes. I've tried to do them late at night too, like just before I go to sleep, maybe make myself tired and stay up a little extra later and just get my brain in that kind of wonky space and try to write a story and just affect my mind like that, those experiments. But I wake up in the morning and the first thing I write, I just turn it into a story. I might have to look at something in the room or out the window. It might just be some remnant of a dream. It might just be something that's firmly and just, in the zeitgeist, things about current events or something. And I just write the story. And that'll be from between anywhere from 300 to 800 words. Those short ones are what I've learned are called microfiction, like 200 to 400 words. I guess that's a microfiction story. And then
Hmm.
400 to like 1,000 words is a flash fiction story. But the way I look at it is almost like instant fiction because I don't decide ahead of time what I'm going to write. 95% of the time, I don't know what I'm going to write about when I sit down. I just go. So I'm kind
Yeah.
of accessing my subconscious mind. I'm trying to just access whatever's trying to come out, let it come out. Don't get in the way. Just let it hit the page. You know?
All right, Halfling gives me a great idea.
Uh,
Let's do an instant fiction contest at a convention. Let's go to a convention.
ooh,
We'll hand out blue bucks, and we'll tell the contestants write as many microfiction stories as you can in 30 minutes.
wow.
Yeah,
uh,
they take me usually. They're usually written. I do a grammar check and a spell check, and I just go over it and look for any run-on sentences that are too much and try to shorten them, and that's it. It usually takes me 45 minutes to do that, and then another 45 minutes to upload the podcast. So the whole thing's done in under 2 hours.
wow.
Mhm.
Well,
Wow.
that's perfect because the halfling wanted me to talk to you a little bit about your storytelling on your podcast. So, what types of stories do you write for your story podcast, and what is the process you use to have that story idea? You're talking a little bit about the instant storytelling, and how does that pan out and develop into this audio podcast that you're doing?
Well, like I said, I wake up and I usually use the keyboard. Sometimes I use a paper and pen. It depends how late it is. If I wake up really early out of a dream, then I just use a paper and pencil, paper and a pen or whatever. But if my usual wake up time is sometime between 4 and 5 in the morning, I just turn the computer on and just start banging the keys until I see a coherent sentence, and then I build the story out of that. Um, and then from there, it's a quick spell check. Like I said, a grammar spell check, and I use a couple of different language tools for that. I use the language tool app for that, and I also use Hemingway. Sometimes, if I feel like I've got too many rambly sentences, I'll use Hemingway and just
Okay.
try to figure out a way to make the point with less paraphrasis, and then but not usually. But for full disclosure, what I don't have a problem using tools once in a while. Um,
Sure.
and then from that point, I turn on my microphone and it's audio only. I turn on my microphone, open up my recording software, and read the story into the microphone, and then put my introduction and my send off at the beginning and the end of the story. Just punch them in and then mix it down to one, continuous track, and then upload it onto my Substack, commercialherschel.substack.com. That's it. It's really
Awesome.
it. And it's less than 2 hours. It takes me less than 2 hours at this point. It took me longer at first while I got used to it. And I think if anybody went back to my stories, went to my Substack and started reading from 2024 to now, they'd see that I think that it's improved my writing a lot to have that kind of discipline. Of course, I've always
Mhm.
wrote from a place of desire. Uh, it's only probably been in the last maybe 10 years that I've been writing from not just a place of desire, but from a place of discipline, like purposefully sitting down and writing every day to improve as a writer. So that's probably been the last 10 years. But I've always written from just a place of pure enjoyment and fascination for the process of thinking.
Mhm. And that's something that we've talked about with a lot of writers is is trying to figure out what your motivation is for actually doing this. And and it varies from writer to writer. Sometimes you just have an idea in your mind and you just have to get it out on paper. And it won't go away till you get it out. And then sometimes it's, well, I want to write the next bestseller. Yeah, so it really, you have to kind of examine your motives for writing,
Yeah,
and
well,
just
that's a good question. Great question. There are people who write books, and their books are almost pre-formatted in terms of they're looking at their page, and it is going to look like the printed page. So they're not writing a manuscript and then having it formatted later. They're formatting it as they write it. And what those people do is they learn how to make every sentence make you want to go to the next sentence, and the end of every page make you want to turn the page. Those are page turners. I've done interviews with people like that, and I find it fascinating. And it seems like a contrivance if you at the beginning when you first think about it, but I really think that there's something to the discipline and the purpose of that. That's actually laudable. Like to have that kind of discipline, to make yourself write in a way that makes people want to keep turning the pages is not, that's not, it's not strictly business writing because there's an imaginative story behind it. So it's a kind of cool merger of those two things. So I think that there's something akin to that in the instant fiction that that I that I write. There, I think there's a relationship there.
yeah, yeah. I can definitely see that. Well, what has been when you like wake up in the morning and you hit the keyboard or you hit your pen and paper, or late at night before you go to bed, what has come out that's been the biggest surprise for you? That but you put it on paper and then you're like, "Oh."
Um, that's a good question. I don't know. I write on so many different subjects. I write everything from science fiction to kind of weird, quirky family miscommunications, meet cutes, um, paranormal stories, stories about prayer and meditation, stories about contemporary issues like the advent of artificial intelligence, these UFO, UAP kinds of things that are just kind of in the zeitgeist,
Mhm.
And like I said, I never really know what I'm going to write when I sit down. So it's always a surprise. Like it's a surprise almost every time. Recently, I wrote a
Mhm.
story called Hucklebuckle Beanstalk. That's the most recent flash fiction story on my Easytopia podcast. That was a forethought. That was because I had heard a podcast where two guys were talking, and one guy said that he and his sisters didn't know where their father's ashes ended up. They don't know where they went, and they can't find them. And I found that I was inspired by that, so I wrote a story about that specific
Oh.
concept. But um, normally there's no preconceived notion. So pretty much every time I write a story, it's a surprise to me. Like pretty much. Other things happen though, like characters that I have written from longer pieces I've written, like novellas or attempts at novels. Those characters arise back up. That's one of the phenomenons of writing is that these characters take on lives of their own and minds of their own, and they kind of exist in your brain like little creations. And sometimes they just
Mhm.
have to reemerge. Yeah, and that's kind of fun when that happens. I'm like, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. And then, next thing you know, I'm writing them again, and they're coming out. They're coming out of me again, and I don't know why. That's the fascinating part. I don't know why. That's the fun. That's the magnificence of it to me. I don't know why. I don't have to know why.
That's true. That's true. You just go with the flow, so to
I
speak.
do. Yeah, I'm a pantser. There's
Yeah.
pantsers, right? And there's plotters. I'm a pantser for sure.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I would need an editor if I was going to write a real novel. I would need somebody to help me keep it moving in the right, keep it in a direction because it would just go everywhere.
Have you thought about writing a novel?
I'm working, I do have manuscripts, and right now I've recently been submitting to places with a lot of confidence. The more confidence than I've ever had sending out those
Oh,
inquiries.
okay.
So
Mhm.
I don't, of course, know what or if anything's going to happen. But doing my interview podcast and uh, taking some online courses in terms of how to write more purposefully as opposed to just writing kind of from scratch has helped me gain insight on how to present myself and
Mhm.
those business types of approaches can be valuable. Hopefully that'll be a valuable experience.
Right. Okay. Um, I want to go back and switch gears for a second, going back to your podcast because you talked about interviewing other authors.
Hmm.
So tell us a little bit about that. Who have you interviewed? How did you get your guests and so forth?
Okay. Well, so I have the two podcasts. One's called Easytopia, and that's my flash microfiction, instant fiction podcast. And then
Uh-huh.
the other podcast I have is called The Arc of the Bard. And the premise is, every storyteller has a story. And I don't
Yeah.
care. I don't care if they've written a book or not. I tend to get people who've written books, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But if somebody just is a fiction writer and they've never had anything published, or if they only have a Substack right now or some other blog that they're experimenting with, I would find them as equally valuable to speak with. And the foundational question that I ask is, what do you think the origin of stories are? Where do thoughts come from? How does consciousness derive these stories, and what is behind that, and why do we bring them forward? That's like the foundational question of my show, very similar to the questions you asked me. And I get a different answer from everybody, and they tell me everything from the collective consciousness, super
Mm.
consciousness, the subconscious mind, genetic memory, and or reincarnation kinds of influences, to a really great materialist answer I had, which I found to be really fascinating, was the idea that it's part of the evolutionary process that we bring every idea that we have forward because the best ones are going to help us excel and go forward. I thought that was fascinating. I find that and no less relevant than any of the other ideas that I've heard. Some people pretty much skip right over the question and they just want to talk about character development, or they want to talk about
Mhm.
dialogue writing or some other thing that they enjoy. That's fine too. Like, I'm okay with that because that's where they're at and they have a lot to teach. I've had podcasts with people who have written plays and who have
Mhm.
won awards with their playwriting, or as theater directors, or people who have written short screenplays or been television writers, people who have written game adaptations, people who are multimedia creators. So they are all storytellers. And I just really want to get to the
Mhm.
bottom of that question. And then from there, I ask them all the general questions, like you asked me, what inspired you? Was there a teacher that really said something profound to you? Did somebody encourage you? What was it that really that validated you as a thinking person and as a writer? What made you want to go there? Same questions that we all have. It's the same thing. And then they will read an excerpt from something, or they might read some poetry, or they might read one of their very short stories, something around 1,000 words, and we talk about that. Then I'll read one of my flash fiction, microfiction, instant fiction stories. If it relates, and I'll figure out if I can find something I've written that relates to their story or to relates to the direction our conversation went in, and then they'll read another excerpt, another 800 to 100,000 word excerpt, and then we'll talk a little bit more, and that show lasts about an hour, and I'm never ever disappointed. I put the word out there, and they show up and they're into it.
Yeah.
And again, I really do like to help writers promote their books, but that's not a prerequisite. It's not a prerequisite.
Right.
I would like to have somebody on sometime who's maybe not even a fiction writer, but maybe they're a neuroscientist, and to talk to them about consciousness. I would like to do that, somewhat here and there. Maybe one of those shows every couple months or something too. That would be really good. I'd be okay with it.
In keeping with your theme, it would be interesting to interview an anthropologist about storytelling, because storytelling has been such a key component to the human experience for pretty much as long as we've been a species.
Mm-hmm. I've had people on, I had a doctor on who writes, she writes what they call, I wish I could remember what it's termed right now. She writes these stories that are retellings of the old ancient stories, the old ancient Greek stories, or the old ancient fairy tales. She does modern retellings of them in a new way. Alicia Anderson is her name, and she read a great excerpt from a book of hers where she took the story of the Princess and the Pea, right, that old story, and she did an adaptation of it that was about autism because of the hypersensitivity of autistic people.
Yeah.
So that princess could feel that pea on all those mattresses. So she took that and she turned it into something new. And she's a doctor she's a doctor who studies anthropology and all of these things. So it happened by accident. I had somebody I thought who was a fiction writer, and it turns out she's a doctor of all of these things. So it happens.
It's amazing how that happens.
That is so cool.
People are cool. There's a lot of really, we think about the greatness and the coolness of humanity as being this anomalous thing. And, every once in a while there's a rising star. But the average, so many just regular everyday people you've never heard of are truly quite brilliant. And they just don't get the accolades because for whatever reason, they don't get that, that spark, they don't get that starstruck power. But human consciousness is quite a phenomenon that I don't consider to be insignificant. And I don't consider it to be just this anomalous thing out at the edge of the universe. I think that it's very purposeful and very meaningful, and that just because we're supposedly small in the universe and we're just supposed to be so insignificant and all that, and space and time, size is relative. It's all fractal. Those things don't mean anything. Consciousness is what means something. Consciousness is what we have, and our consciousness expands all the way out into the universe as far as you can imagine it.
Well, I want to do what I'm famous for and switch gears one more time.
Yeah, I'm ready.
With the different projects that you have, the podcast, the two podcasts, and the microfiction and flash fiction, what has been your biggest challenge in doing these things?
I think the biggest challenge is probably creating the kind of a life for myself that gives me the time to do it. It's really very important to me. So I'd rather live in a trailer out somewhere in the desert or in the woods where I can write and where I can explore consciousness and explore storytelling than have a really nice big house someplace where I don't have the time to do those things. So I guess just maintaining the types of conditions around me that will allow me to do that. And I'm in an inspired location. I live in southern Arizona, out in the hills, and it's rather spectacular nature. So that is quite inspiring. To go outside at night and do a meditation session under the stars out here is not
Wow.
it's not small.
I can only imagine. Sounds wonderful.
Well, Herschel, it's now time for us to get to the core of the interview.
Okay.
For all our listeners out there, all our viewers on YouTube, and all the ships at sea, can you tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and where they can find your Substack?
Okay. Well, my Substack is commercialherschel.substack.com. And you can also do a search for Easytopia, EASY, the word easy, and then the word topia after it. You could do a search for The Arc of the Bard. Arc is spelled A-R-C. Bard is spelled B-A-R-D, The Arc of the Bard. You'll find my podcasts on every podcasting app that's out there, and the podcast descriptions will have links to all of my interviews and their links, all my authors' links and their links, and it'll link you back to my Substack as well. And I hope that you'll take advantage of the Substack, because at the Substack, you get all of the links to the different things that are mentioned in the interviews, and you get the authors' links, and you also get the written transcript of my stories, because I don't just tell the stories. I put them in written form too for people who want to read them along with my writing. Some people really like that. They like to just read along with me as I read the story, you know.
That is awesome, and we will get all of that in the show notes so that people can find you
Thank
and
you.
your Substack
Thank you.
and what you're doing.
Yeah, it sounds like a great opportunity for some of our listeners to become Herschel's listeners.
Make sure that, I
Absolutely.
mean, and any of your guests that want to expand their, their podcast experience, and they want to come on and talk with me, they most certainly should do that. They should most certainly contact me. I'm really easy to contact through my Substack DM or my email address, which is simply commercialherschel@proton.me. Send me an email. Tell me that you saw me on the show, The Halfling and the Spaceman, and that you would like to be on my show. I'll send you a schedule, a calendar link, and it'll happen. It's not complicated. It's really quite simple.
That sounds awesome, and I hope that some of our previous guests and future guests will take
I
advantage of
hope so
that.
too. I hope so too.
But we want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us and talk about what you're doing. It has been a real pleasure to get to know you, and we wish you just continued success as you explore, the idea of consciousness and how far out into the universe it goes, and just and everything you're writing. I love the fact that you don't think about what you're writing; it just kind of comes out, and then I think that's awesome.
Do you write fiction?
No.
No.
We've both attempted badly in the past.
Keep practicing.
But we really
write instant fiction, write little stories, write 400-word stories. Challenge yourselves. Do it 7 days in a row. Do them 7 days in a row and send them to me, and I'll put them on my Substack. If you write 7 in a row in 7 days, I'll put them on my Substack. I'll do it. I'm telling you, send them to me.
This fall, I might take you up on it.
It's a challenge.
It's good for you.
Well, like I said, we want to thank you so much. It has
Likewise.
been a real pleasure and treat talking.
It
with
really
you.
has. It's been wonderful.
Well, and we also want to thank our audience for joining us today, and we hope that you've been inspired and entertained by today's guest, Herschel Sterling, also known as Commercial Herschel. And this is Roger the Spaceman for The Halfling and the Spaceman, signing out.